Okay, now this is just a quick one on theory. Now, I guess quick is an intersubjective understanding of the world. So maybe some people think, no, this isn't quick. These are excruciating. But I don't care. I don't have to watch them. But anyways, behind me is Ortega y Murillo, and it says assassinos, like assassins. A lot going on in Nicaragua now, and this is part of what we're going to talk about with theory. What is theory? Well, theory's thrown around a lot, and people just talk about it like, oh, just the theoretical, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go over two quick types of theory, right? That's important for the social sciences to understand. Theory, first of all, like I talked about, ontologically and epistemologically stating, it is basically cause and effect, right? Ontologically, there is a real world, and epistemologically, this is how we get our knowledge, through cause and effect. You can use mainstream qualitative research, basically case studies, cause and effect. Independent variable is the cause. The dependent variable is the result. Remember that, people. Second, and possibly more importantly, we are able to act like the real sciences, meaning like the medical sciences in these kind of theories. So this is very valuable. Why, for example, does human trafficking occur? Why do revolutions occur? Theoretically, there's a lot of theory on these things. So, for example, with revolutions or instability, deprivation theory, people aren't meeting their basic needs. There's the resources theory. They fight over resources. There's Samuel Huntington's idea, fight over culture, the more Marxist, although I don't like the idea of saying Marxism because, it gets a bad rap because people vulgarize it, etc. Because I think class is very important to understand. There is class conflict out there. People fight because of class, and classes have the tendency to, take all the resources. So the upper class, regardless whether you're in a communist, socialist, or, capitalist society, or indigenous tribes, they do fight over certain resources, right? Because people like resources and they try to get it for their own family, etc. So class is very important. That's what theory is. Theory is the cause of things, right? Behind me, Ortega y Murillo. Murillo is the wife of Daniel Ortega, the president who won't step down and has been president for a long time now, like president for life in Nicaragua. So why are there so many Nicaraguan immigrants coming? People would point to that, right? Because Daniel Ortega, his first two periods in office were actually very popular. But then he basically changed the Constitution to keep running, and put his wife as vice president. And you know how it goes. There's huge protests. And then people, the economy kind of dips. There's sanctions. And then a lot of Nicaraguans come to the United States. So if you're going to do a research on immigration, why are there a lot of Nicaraguans coming over the border? This is one of the reasons, right? But the second type of theory, ontologically speaking, as you probably know what I'm going to say because you've had me before, if you have, is the more interpretive postmodern, where to me, they're still looking for cause and effect, although they're incredulous about that word. They're looking at how we perpetuate and legitimize things. So basically, how do we legitimize a certain, say, government or delegitimize a certain government? So you take the last, I was going to say Super Bowl, but World Cup in Qatar, and a lot of people say, see, we're legitimizing Qatar. It's not a democracy. Look at all those, people who died building the stadium. But the fact that FIFA has the World Cup there, you're legitimizing a dictatorship, where behind me, this might be a dictatorship. You delegitimize it, right? Through sanctions and everything else. So what the more interpretive methods do is look at how we perpetuate, legitimize things, right? So when the United States invades Iraq, Afghanistan, Haiti, Nicaragua, and all these other countries, we legitimize it through discourse, right? That's their theory. And we call it like, Iraqi freedom. We call things like just cause. That was the invasion of Panama, even though we were supporting Noriega through that time. And then we delegitimize, say, Russia and Ukraine. So they look at all of the discourse and all of these entities around us. The same thing goes with critical race theory. It is actually a method on how we perpetuate and legitimize good or bad with races. So one of the interesting things is when Donald Trump calls the Latinos malos hombres or bad hombres or whatever, that is delegitimizing Latinos as bad people. They're rapists, they're coming over, there's an invasion. They look at this discourse, and then that leads to a dislike of these people. So those are kind of the two types of theory I like to talk about, is that you have one, cause and effect, right? Why is there revolution? Why is there human trafficking? Why is there, so many social phenomena? Why is there war, right? Why do nations go to war? A great book by Stroessner, where he starts talking about miscommunication. So that's how theory is, cause and effect. This leads to that. So that's very important. That's the theories. There's a lot of good theories. If you took my political violence course, we get into all the theories, cause and effects of why there's political violence, according to Tilly. Then you have to ask yourself, then there's the more ontologically speaking, reality is socially constructed. So you look at propaganda, you look at how we socially construct a certain entity. Like you're going to see in the boogeyman, and you're also going to see in a feminist understanding of gender, how we socially constructed Mike Dukakis. He went from just being a very strong governor to a wimp. You'll see the Willie Horton ad. That'll be like critical race theory, where Lee Atwater created this ad and showed that Mike Dukakis let this African-American out. And essentially, if you vote for Mike Dukakis, black men, which are bad, are going to rape your daughter. And that was what that was about. It was a very racist commercial for a lot of people. And you'll see it in the video. Feminism, how do we socially construct women as sex object? You're going to see that. And does that lead to violence? And that's a more interpretive understanding. The interpretive understanding is very important for courts. A lot of people dismissive. If you take this class with someone else, they probably won't do interpretive methods. But a lot of people are going to study law. How many people are going to study law out there? I always ask when I do this in class. A lot of people raise their hands. I do a lot of recommendations for law. You're socially constructing people in the middle of a case. So when I worked as an expert witness, I had to convince the jury, or not, it wasn't a jury, it was more of a judge, that this individual, right, is in harm's way if he gets deported back to Nicaragua, because he's a journalist, and journalists go to jail. So I, being an expert witness, had to socially construct this reality. I didn't lie, by the way. I want to make that clear, that he was, in danger of his life if he got sent back. Throughout court cases, that's what you're doing. Who is Jodi Arias? If you know her, who killed that guy, the Mormon guy, what was his name? Because he was Mormon. He wasn't supposed to be having sex, but he was having sex with her. And then he was going to dump her, and she killed him. Which, watch out, people. Yeah, it was a pretty weird case. But she claimed, no, I was being abused, and it was self-defense, right? So each side is socially constructing a story. Right. Same thing as I mentioned before, the O.J. Simpson. You're going to see an awesome video, right, on how O.J. Simpson's lawyers. I want you to watch the whole thing on Netflix. It's really good. But if you only see pieces of it, make sure you get this piece. It's when the lawyers go into O.J. Simpson's house. They see these pictures, photos, and all this other stuff, and say, wow, this is really sexist, etc. And they change all of the paintings, the photos, I think there was a cake and all this stuff, into stuff more pro-African American community, in order to change his identity, to change the meaning of O.J. Simpson. He is one of us. He's a good person. He's the victim of racism, etc. So it's very interesting, and this really leads to how court cases are won or lost. So it does have value, this kind of ontological idea that there is no reality, and then you build a case based on alternative realities, which is basically what you're doing in a court case. So that's what theory is. Number one, it's like the medical sciences, etc., cause and effect, right? We try to ferret out the variables that cause something. Remember, the causal variables are independent variables. The result are dependent variables. And it's more like the sciences. So there was revolution in Cuba. Why? Let's go look at all the independent variables. Then we create a theory around it, like deprivation theory. Deprivation theory is the idea that people aren't meeting their needs, their basic needs, water, life, happiness. I mean, this can be very, extensive, and then they end up picking up arms, weapons to overthrow the government. Then you've got the more interpretive, postmodern theory. I use those words interchangeably. I'll just use interpretive, where there is no reality, but then we construct a reality and that leads to something else, like kind of a thinking, right? So the idea was to create a good person in O.J. Simpson, right? Victim of racism. We all know, if you remember, the glove didn't fit. And then, Furman, the racist cop, was he a Nazi? All this stuff. Basically to get him off. But then the other side has the task of creating a reality of O.J. Simpson. I love that trial. I know I'm old, but because I remember when it came out and they were socially constructing this story, right? That no, he's a wife beater. This is historical, and he ended up killing his wife and also the poor waiter who was with him. And you're going to see the same thing with the recent Idaho case where those students were killed, where obviously the defense is going to say, no, this person studied an undergraduate in criminology. He has a master's degree. He was studying a PhD. He can't be guilty of this crime. He was an upstanding member of the community. Of course, if he was studying a PhD, I'd hang him, because people who study PhDs, a lot are a little crazy. It's kind of interesting, this case, but I'm sure, and it's a very lamentable case, right? When those students were killed. So basically the defense is trying to, because they've said, we're going to exonerate this guy, going to use that he was studying a PhD, he was a good member of society, with the others side is going to say, no, he had this weird serial killer, mentality, etc. You see these play out, this kind of more ontological stuff, in a lot of court cases and foreign policy and a lot of important. So they're all important. So the reason I'm stressing this so much, when you do your final paper, think about anything you can do. You can do a propaganda case, how we perpetuate and legitimize something, foreign policy. You could do a court case, which would be good if you want to study law. You could do a court case, which would be really cool, how they socially construct the different sides and why one won and didn't. You could do jury selection, etc. And then you could actually write that if you go to law school and put it in your cover letter or resume and basically put, I learned different methodological approaches and I applied it to law cases. So that would be a more utilitarian, useful for you. Or if you want to get into foreign policy, you can talk about that, etc. So, start thinking now, because these classes do move fast. But I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and take care, everyone. COVID is coming back, I heard, or is it fake? See? Conspiracy theories, etc. You could do a great paper on conspiracy theories as well. I mean, that's how we kind of socially construct realities. Take care, everyone.